Hi. Starting again, I guess today I wanted to speak a little bit about the reversibility of considering consciousness as primacy over physical, over that which is physical. Um, and I wanted to talk, somebody brought up Gödel's incompleteness theorem and as it relates to synthetic a priori. And so I didn't catch exactly how it is they were wanting to discuss that, but I've been thinking about that over the last little while. Watched a conference report video where he was talking about outsourcing symbols, kind of a dissemination of symbols that that we relate to, we echo. Listen to an Eric Orwell video, and how I relate that is kind of this notion that we already have a meaning for a lot of words. When you hear a word, you just innately know the meaning, especially if it's your mother tongue. And I don't know, those are the things that are going on in my head right now. I'm still having a difficult time with this painting, putting it all together, kind of maneuvering it. I'm not drawing from a sketch necessarily. It's kind of just coming out as I'm sketching on the canvas directly, see what comes of it. So it's kind of interesting doing it that way, when perhaps I should be sketching it beforehand. Um, but that's where I'm at right now. Um, Not certain I showed what it is I added last time. I have a death figure here, Sharon down there, which is like the death figure. I have a kind of a rodent cycloptic kid here, and my brother came over and mentioned that I should put a hamster wheel in, or a rat wheel in. So I'm going to be doing that, as well as adding some checkerboard patterns underneath my flaming woman here. Today, that's kind of what's on the docket. And so, how to go about doing that. Um, Smoking heavily and drinking a lot of coffee. So that's not necessarily a great diet to be on. But as I'm sketching the hell area, I told myself that's what I would be doing. And so that's what I'm working on. And so to talk about the reversal of physicalism being primacy over consciousness being primacy over physical, over that which is physical. I wanted to say that I think it's, I'd like to make it akin to synthetic a priori and analytic a priori, or analytic statements, and that the synthetic is a means of having a knowledge base of the world and putting it in a statement, where analytic philosophy deals with, definitional reiterations, kind of like all men are bachelors, um, or yeah, husbands are male type of thing. And hang on a second, I gotta line my drawing up here appropriately. Um, anyway, and so the idea that all men, I think about synthetic a priori statements as um, akin to speaking about consciousness as being primacy over that which is physical, in that it's kind of a loss of logic, a purposeful um, application of misusing. This isn't going to work, I just noticed. Dun, dun, dun. Got to change the direction here a little bit more. Um, but yeah, this the idea of kicking away the ladder of logic, allowing synthetic a priori, meaning when you say, if you said men are rich, you wouldn't necessarily be talking about economically, but you could say that's synthetic a priori, instead of men are husbands or husbands are men, which would be analytic. And so there's this idea that that if you think about kind of non-logical thoughts that you can have, then you can consider that which is in your consciousness, kind of looking at the world in a way in which would, let's say, deny evolutionary theory, a means where the application of evolutionary theory is not, it's not in your realm of consideration at a particular time. And so during that lack of application, during that time where it's not applied, it's almost a kicking away instruments of culturally dominated knowledges, kicking away culturally dominated knowledges, and looking at the world in kind of a static state. It's not an outright denial of the mechanisms of knowledge. It's more or less a means of, yeah, not an outright denial. It's more like a forgetting or a non-utilization process where okay, I don't want to have to redraw my checkerboard again, but I might have to do so. Um, kind of like when you're in a meditative trance, you're not thinking about knowledges necessarily, and you're not thinking about histories of knowledges. Um, you're simply meditating. You let ideas pass away, and you're more in your solipsistic center, looking at your world as it's coming about directly, as you're sensing it immediately in kind of I mean, how to put it, in its immediate environment. You're taking on your presence, and you're looking at correlations of word patterns and symbol patterns. And this understanding of a symbol, after you're habituated to it, is takes on a role like looking at a stop sign or traffic signs. When you see the shape of a stop sign or a stop sign, you may know what that is, what that means, without actually reading the word stop on it, and letting the meaning of the word stop come in and affect your person. And so that is my idea there, kind of kicking away logic, kicking away knowledges for short instances where you're simply looking at your consciousness, and then you're able to apply language to what it is you're sensing. Let's see if I can get this lined up where I want it. And like the stop sign, you're able to respond to symbols in a more immediate sort of way. And these symbols at this point, for lack of a better word, can take on spiritual meaning. By spiritual meaning, I mean that point where you've left the groundedness of logic, as if logic itself is a type of pill in the Jefferson Airplane song about Alice. You know, one pill makes you larger, one pill makes you small. To avoid the chess players as they're applying logic, because you'll see that it's not needed that you envelop the chess player's logic, the logic of language. So I can't remember the lyrics to the song, but there's something about the chess players, and so I'm trying to open up a realm. This to me is the clearing, that we have language allowances that are like synthetic a priori to come in and weigh upon our psychology and weigh upon notions of meaning, and then when you re-grip to the knowledges of the world, inherited knowledge structures, like let's say I'm referring to evolution, then you can recenter yourself back on that, and then you shift and you vacillate back to physicalism being primacy over consciousness. But as you allow kicking away of knowledge, a suspension of knowledge, you start applying synthetic a priori, or start just taking on an imbuement of symbolism, as if you have a natural reaction to, let's say, the idea of a satyr, the symbol of a satyr. It might mean something satanic to you. It might ricochet through a movie. It might mean something about the natural man. Whatever the symbol takes on, there's a variability of how the individual reacts to imagery. And so it's that orienting symbols together, in my case, manufacturing symbols in a group or proximity to one another, as to take on a type of related meaningship, that the meaningfulness of the group of symbols takes on, is greater than any individual symbol by itself, and yet staying away from using images opposed to syntax to relay meanings. That's kind of my point in drawing my hell, is to, even though I have numbers in here, 13 and 666, and I have the word inferno, the majority of symbols are, or aspects of my painting are just images. And so trying to kind of gut the power of imagery is interesting. Now, Piro brought up in one of my most recent videos, because I was talking about the loss of mathematics. If we removed humans from the universe and humans were the only intelligence in the universe, then we would be removing mathematics from the universe. It's to say that mathematics is a lingual system that we use for pattern recognition. And then I even challenged the idea of pattern recognition. If we removed sentient creatures that recognize patterns from the universe, then patterns would cease to exist. And I mean that in one argument state, and then I once again vacillate, oscillate, move back to the notion that the patterns remain in the universe. And so Emendem would take on the philosophy that the patterns remain in the universe and that the mathematics remain in the universe, that logic is somehow a independent, objective occurrence that humans are discovering, as opposed to an occurrence that humans are inventing. And because consciousness can move to non-logical forms and kick away logical patternings, kick away mathematical thought, kick away kind of a pattern recognition, more like a rote reactive response to patterns, as opposed to a recognizing patterns. What do I mean by that? That's a tough one. It's tough to get out of this notion of pattern recognition when it's kind of like when in an awaking state where you don't remember your dream, and you wake up and you see a static image of your wall, and that static image takes on no meaning. It might have patterns to it. You may recognize you're waking up as a pattern, but let's say you don't. Let's say nothing is coming to mind, and there's kind of a loss of pattern recognition. Then there's this idea of patternings that occur kind of like snowflake patternings. Each snowflake is different, but each snowflake is a pattern, a hexagonal patterning, but each snowflake is different. And then to think about, to what extent do hexagonal patternings go beyond just snowflakes, but occur in many ways in the universe. And then to speak about kind of like a fractal goes infinitely large and infinitely small through, let's say it's a hexagonal based fractal, and it continues in things as small as snowflakes, but it jumps up to plant patterns and to geological patternings, crystalline patternings in rocks and stones, and And let's say that this patterning, this fractal, this dimension of hexagonal patterning continues to grow into the universe, into different things that go beyond humans, more of a complication, meaning such a since patternings and fractals are infinitely small and reiterable and infinitely large and reiterable, then one could say that a dimension of patterning, of hexagonal patterning, continues infinitely into the universe in some accord, and that we're just not recognizing these higher patternings. Somebody questioned me, if I'm spiritual, then I'm non-material. I said, no, I'm not saying I'm a non-materialist. I'm just saying that whatever I call the spirit realm might be a type of of materialism that's not recognized on this planular level of consideration. And if it's not recognized on this level, then it might be something that is extended out farther or further into the universe and echoes back down its infinite fractal. If we're looking at all hexagonal patternings as a fractal of one another, then it would continue infinitely. And so a spiritual realm could simply be a dimension of fractal patterning that is not controllable, that is not recognized regularly by people or witnessed by people. And if it is witnessed, it's not controllable, because it's practically undefinable. You have to first define something and then control something, be able to control it, to place science upon it. And so that's kind of the idea that there could be a spirit realm that I believe in, that is material, that is beyond our sciences, beyond human definition in general, and then beyond science's control. So we have people in the chat room now, and let's see. First chat, Ron says, I don't have Facebook, and this video keeps messing with me. Rocks don't feel, but chemistry is amazing on the micro level. I don't think it is magic. Well, that's fine. I'm just saying that the microcosm that could even go smaller than what you're considering may play a role in the microcosm that you're describing, and a macrocosm may have information about the microcosm, in that the microcosm that you're speaking about with rocks is an iteration of a like a dimensional fractal, that the fractal reiterates throughout the cosmos. And it doesn't particularly matter if you believe it or not. I don't mind you saying what it is you believe. It's just that I'm going to say what it is I want to say as a retort to what it is you're saying. And so they continue saying, I heard you talking about fractals. In a way, I get you. Nature does have patterns. Yeah. And so I'm thinking about patterns in terms of how they relate in subject matter, icons and imagery, a pattern of reiterative imagery as they're disseminated through culture. They can take on a role, but you have to inherit context for images. Generally, you have to have a context, I believe, in order to understand imagery. Kind of like I was telling my niece, I said, you know, I remember when you were real young, you would walk into darkness and you weren't afraid of it at all. You just walked into it, and that you had to learn that darkness was scary. It wasn't just innately scary. That the lack of imagery, the darkness, took on a contextual meaning that enveloped this notion of fear. Just like a satyr or an image of Lucifer or 666 or whatever else I'm depicting in my painting takes on a particular role, and that role is contextually bound, and so I'm trying to bind figurines in my painting that necessarily take on something that I might consider a darkness, a badness, a repulsion, a hell, a fear, a scariness, and collaborate them, put them all together. 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. And they go on to say, I no longer think just religion is the problem in the world. It's not so simple. Yeah, I don't think that religion is necessarily a problem, the only problem in the world. I think about religious dogmatic, a dogmatism of symbolism in terms of like a crucifix or Mother Mary or Jesus, different iconography, the Buddha, and energy levels coming out. These are all inherited dogmatic symbolism or imageries that take on a context. And so if you're familiar with the context, then the imagery becomes profound and accented as the central theme of the imagery. And we ricochet our thoughts off of that, and then we become, once we know the context or a context for it, we generally take on a sympathy for it or an anti-sympathy for the imagery, and it's this anti-sympathy for contextual imagery, along with a dissolution of finding quote unquote logical meaning in biblical scripts, that has so many let's say Catholics moving to atheism. The story of the religion is too harsh. There's not enough good news in the context of religion. So some of the religious iconography takes on a negativity, and yet even in the Catholic context, as Christ covers over the sins of the man, of the human, allows one who is ignorant of their sins to sin and have Christ cover it over, then one is aware of their sins, as kind of a moral depravity or a continuance against a moral law that yeah, that Christ still could be said to cover over these sins, but you're supposed to sin no more and carry on, sin no more and go forth. Like, do your best to not sin at some point. And so iconography then could be a contextual idea that is kept by the unconverted. It's almost like if somebody converts away from religion who was grown up with religion, they still the symbolic imagery, the symbolism and the imagery still plays a role in their consciousness in some form or another, and then they go through denial aspects of the context that the imagery provides. If they're not willing to let their mind meander over meaning, it's generally that they know a meaning, they're imbued by the meaning, but then they layer a a denial or an absenting of evaluation about whatever the meaning is, whether it's good or bad, whether or not it's heartfelt or not. But I believe they can't get away of all uh, in order to develop an anti-sympathy for something that was once sympathetic. They have to envelope the sympathy that they once had and then repulse away from it. So it's like a new layer that has a foot to kick away the old layer. But the act of repulsion is a conscious acceptance of a thing. So in one way, atheists can be a lack of a belief in God, or it can be a repulsion away from God. People that are raised without religion are not necessarily, they're probably more removed away from the context of symbolism found within religion, and so they are more easily able to disregard the symbolism, to have a lack of belief as opposed to a repulsion of belief, than somebody that starts out religious. And yet the community and the inherited culture, the Western, at least American culture, is so religiously bound. And you can't go online without finding imagery. You can't listen to music without having some sort of positive, negative imagery or meaning, contextual meaning that is in the air, that the culture itself has a particular dominance of symbolism and meaning, and then we can look at the dominate symbolism and meaning as a monad in which to move towards or move against or to transpose through. And so it's interesting to think about placing away all imagery far from your mind, or being sophisticated enough to, after you get over sympathies and anti-sympathies and repulsive habituations and attractive habituations, then you can sit in the seat of your presence and disallow connection, if you will, become benign to imageries. And a lot of people wade through imageries in a very benign fashion. And it's kind of like seeing a stop sign and just simply reacting to it without reading stop and saying that's what stop means in their mind. It's just, there's a shape, it's there's kind of a normative patterning relative to the image that has us stopping. And it's A's in the room. Anyway, time to do a rat wheel. Yay, rat wheels. Waking to futures all alone. You are then on a rolling stone. Like Morrison said, ride the snake. I've taken a left into Satan's place. Satan's place. No blue moon here. Where's my great life? Soul is a sandbox, dust through time. Dust through time, dust through time. Awaking to futures all alone. You are a black box on the rolling stone. Yep. Anyway, what else you guys got? The world is complex and not so simple based on simple rules. That is my belief. Yeah, I believe there's more complexity than people who try to dogmatically, for example, Emendem's consistent notion that what he's defining as the case is a completeness of the case. I don't know what Kerbals are. I made my first orbit around the planet Kerbals today, just now. I made it home. Must be a game. Right on. Yeah, games are great metaphors for removing oneself from proximity of, just into new caverns of other people's imaginations, spaces of thought, and 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 iconography of the game's choosing as the contextual space. It's interesting to think about a multiplicity of kind of like a conglomeration of characters from many movies and many games, many songs, many icons, many celebrities, everything coming together as a cohesion of one's active consciousness. Um, yeah, trying to contribute to that in my own way is interesting, and I'm not doing anything new by doing what I'm doing, but I am putting my own particular uh, framework on it, and so that's what I'm working on. Let's see. We like games because they simulate real life without any of the ambiguities. I don't know about that. They can be said to simulate real life. You can relay them. You can do a transparency from the game to real life, but what's the real life metaphor of going around another planet and coming back and landing in an ocean? Meaning that's definitely not a real life scenario in that our perspective of going around another planet is limited to other constructed creations and photographs from satellites we've put in space. Um, meaning meaning I don't think that there's directly a one-on-one simulation of real life, but it takes on a metaphoric meaning of, oh, I went around the block and went to the store and came back home. I went around a planet and came back and landed in the ocean. Let's see. Know how to win the game, whereas it's not so simple in real life. of real physics, and you can borrow Lost in Space and kill Kerbals. Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, I get to kill Kerbals, man. What a rad riot. What a ripe rad riot to ride upon. John, if you know what I mean, Mom. Real physics, you can become lost in space and kill Kerbals. Yeah, I think kind of like I bought my niece for Christmas the game Life. Um, and basically you go around a board through some twists and turns and a couple right angles, and you spin a wheel to get the points that you move. You gather money, you get married, you buy a house, you have a baby, and that's the game of life. The complexity of life, if you want to sum it to, uh, you know, like Gary's consumption, reproduction, those two things, um, then you can, the idea of consuming, building, producing, um, earning, and providing, reproducing and then providing and maintaining, like all of these other words you could say are complexities that are part of our modern day. And I thought, getting her that game was kind of a simple thing to do, um, to give her a basic notion of what humans do with their lives in general. Kind of my hopes for her are they remain very basic, and so that's why I got her the game, was so the idea of video games in all of their imaginative complexity and their kind of very different metaphors about living that have little to do with living, that might confuse somebody, that she has a board game of all things that is a metaphor to help her remember the basics of life. Not that she has to follow that, but just I just wanted something simple, as opposed to all of the complexity that comes along with the names of characters in video games and the seemingly endless amount of video games that people can contract themselves to. Anyway, anywho, what to say now? Yeah, um, there's this moment of singular meditation where you awaken and you have one thought about one thing, and it's like focusing on just one dot, one particular particle of thinking, and then from that dot, things start to emerge, things start to pull together, things start to organize in a patterning. And it's as if it grows out of the dot, as if you're in a microcosm, or you're peering down, you're at some level of perceiving a fractal, an infinite fractal, and you see something about it, and then you back away from it and you see it smaller and smaller, and yet what it is you're seeing, the tunnel of what you're backing through, is larger and larger. And I don't know, I'm just thinking about that. Yep. Yip, dip, 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 dip. Shiny shat. All right, make way for the big fishes in again. Not saying too extra much. Again. Okay, let's see what they've been writing here. It has real physics, and you can become lost in space and kill Kerbals. Physics, I meant. I try not to kill people, and that is why I was happy I made it back. Me and my sister played and had the game of life. Oh, great. Yeah. Interesting. Well, time for me to take my habitual break. Um, yeah, I want to put forth for anybody who knows Amendum to replace his notion of addiction with habituation. I already argued that the imposition was a negatively connotated word, and that another word should be used, and I said, that imposition was an incorrect, the idea of imposing upon something that is not. He agreed that he could use another word that was more definitive. It's almost like he would have to create a new word like ephilism in order to describe imposition that does apply to the non-existent. But as far as his notion of addiction, I like to think habituation is less connotatively negative than addiction. And because addiction, once again, it's a loaded word like parasite that imbues, kind of like an image, unnecessarily. What's attached to the word parasite is a parasitic imbuement of a negative attribute, a negative perception, where habituation is not necessarily negative or not as connotatively negative as addiction. But, I don't want to get into the details about whether or not the use of the word and the argumentation about connotation is challenged, because it was challenged in my past by Poodle Susan, and to a point, to an extent, her argument was correct, that the use of the word is not necessarily abstracted enough to be considered connotative, that it still takes on a denotative meaning. But I guess what I'm getting at is the negative association with the word addiction culturally is more tonally reprehensible or negative in value on its face than the word habituation. How one habitats themselves, habituates, continues a concurrence of reiteration. Even addiction might just be reiteration, Screw habituation, just say reiteration. Gary doesn't want such benign words. Anyway, I'm not certain I'm going to keep the video going too extra long because because I don't want to stay absent. But does nature ever call? Yeah, trying to think of the whole of my being as I sense my nervous system, as I sense laughter outside, the light, my body, my cigarette, my voice, my heartbeat, all of these things, this cacophony of occurrences that make up my being right now in the present. and what that means to totalize my being. I keep getting to this idea of totalizing, thinking of myself as a series of fractals that extenuate out into the universe indefinitely and internally indefinitely, and that I'm just somewhere of this organized realm of different patterning systems, patterning arrays, and then it's almost like if you're a material entity, you are a grouped together patterning, kind of like an array that's come together, like a prism. You're a prism where light can shine through you and out of you, and coagulate into a single light, kind of like in the Pink Floyd imagery of light going through a prism. And death is a dismantling of that prism, kind of an offshoot where conception is the beginning of that core, that 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 prism's birth, the growth of the 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 yeah the center of a belly, the center of a womb, the center of an egg that's fertilized is just a collaboration of beginning of universal occurrences coming together, universal arrays coming together in a very specific mode. That's why it's considered a blessing when somebody has a kid, or different religions bless their kids in a fashion. It's like this occurrence is a blessing. It's magical in that you've created the center of a new universe. Then this continuation of trying to determine and evaluate for somebody else's sake what their relationship is with their environment and their universe, and to put so many negatives on it becomes really tiresome. And so this notion that like to not have this blessing, quote unquote, gift of life, this array, this material concurrence of fractal possibility all coming together to make a being for the sake of its non-sufferability, when sufferability is just another array of occurrences. It's another fact that happens through the life experience, and allowing things to unfold. Evolution is an unfolding. So it's interesting to once again move yourself away from the groundedness of consideration of history and evolution, and then look back upon it and appeal to the fact of our being here as a process of an unfolding of, again and again and again, through generation to generation to generation, there's an unfolding of our beings. And to look at evolution and then want to truncate it, want to reach the teleologic end of it, and note or denote yourself as the end of one's bloodline, the end of one's unfolding. It's an interesting thing that people have to go through, that realize that they're the end of their own, the end of their own biological unfolding, because they don't have children, or to have children and then lose the child. This negation against the parent has got to be really rough as well. The idea of the moral idea of smoking as a moral negative because you're harming yourself. You're adding a new array into your array of being, and you're upsetting it. You're increasing its volatility in some way that might cause a cancer, which would deplete your universe's continuance for a greater length of time. It is kind of magical to be beings, to be alive. There's something I believe that is amazing about all of the elements that come together to make an array, to make a being that can come alive, and then the extension and expression of the beings that allow for the technologies that we have, that we are in a makeshift environment with makeshift technology for the communication, is absolutely fascinating. And so I'm left as an awe. I'm awing at this, and it's kind of an ode to life. And that's how I look at life. It was also interesting to listen to Piro and Amendum talk about how they dislike movies and like other movies. And I don't like all movies necessarily, but I really like most movies, most all movies. And this comes from the idea of just thinking about the author's expression being manifest into a movie, and the sentiment or the plot that they decided to choose, the limitations of considerations that they decided to choose. And when, upon breaking myself and living in a nursing home, I remember feeling like these people are at their end, and when I'm at my end, clawing back to life, instead of letting your array go, you have a desire to maintain anything, whether it's bad or good. Just the maintenance of anything, the fact of being awake, seems like something beautiful. And so just being awake, witnessing a movie, witnessing someone else's art, to me is a huge beauty. And so I tend to not dislike people's expressions. I tend to really like whatever they're doing, their art form, their expression, their words, their content. I even try to find value in really harsh content, types of music, types of anger, types of frustration. Anyway, and so I think people that dislike movies and dislike other people because they don't find it to be logically proper or well aligned are they're not close enough to a sensation of their own end to look at whatever somebody else has created as something positive. What do y'all think? What do y'all think, eh? Eh, what do you think, eh? Hey, Zay, here to here. Here, look at my cat for a second while I whistle and go to the pee-pee. Okay, don't look at my cat. Look at the ceiling. Look at the floor. Look at the painting while I fill up my coffee mug. La, da, la, da, 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 da. cream, a little sugar, a little this, a little that, a little something else, something here, something there. So depressiveness and melancholy is kind of interesting because it's a stepping away from virtue of mere existence and seeing things as mundane and the reiterations or whatever the coordinations that they find themselves at in their own life are, you know, there's kind of a loss of value that they find, or a depression about things that they love being taken away from them or being lost, and in kind of a sensation of not being able to find love, hope, or faith in whatever it is they have remaining, no matter how harsh the conditions are that they go through. Perhaps I need a bishop, if you will, on just outside the third square. Ba, 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 ba. Maybe it shouldn't be a bishop, maybe it should be a knight. I think I'll put a bishop there. Anyway, any words that you guys have that you'd like to talk about a little bit? It's so interesting. I always thought the shape of a bishop on a chess set looked like a knight's helmet. You know. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm saying? You eating what I'm serving? You picking up what I'm laying down? God, my perspective is just off. There's 7 other people in the room, and they're all silent observers. Well, I am recording this video if you care to look at it again later on. If you think I've said anything of value. Hey, kitty. Me little kitty. Dispersion of symbols and imagery. Kitty. Yeah. There's a band called Broken Silence that I really like. I'd throw that out there for y'all to hear me say what I like. There's a movie called Words that I watched recently that I really liked. Okay, how to do a wheel radish sort of character in it. Mickey Mouse. Alrighty. Alright, let's do the mouse in there. Do mousy things. Running on its wheel. Yeah, thanks for being so involved, guys. Thanks for coming in to just sit down and listen. Just fine. Those are for the most part, you guys heard my general thoughts of the day already. But I don't know how to look at life as a positive, as a real joy. Can be difficult. Trying to think about how to relay the joys people have in life when so many movies and so many virtues that people have about rising up in hierarchies to successes with their goals as a real joy for them, and kind of celebrating other people's accomplishments. This tends to be what our culture focuses upon, as opposed to the negative and the mundane. Kind of an acceptance and a delight for what other people achieve. I think that's real important. I don't know what to say about it. Let's see. What do we have here? A happy little mouse. A happy little mousey. Yeah, to think about the paranormal, occurrences that happen that appear to have agency beyond ours, is like a macrocosm of the fractal occurrence of our being that is not necessarily always understood, especially if you use kind of yang drugs, like yin and yang drugs being kind of a collapsing inward and inwardness. You know, I'm using coffee, a lot of beans, a lot of yang ingredients in my diet, as opposed to yin, which is outward, unless I've got these wrong, but yin being outward and open and receptive, kind of like green leafy foods, a diet and a habit of not, like using marijuana might be more yin, where smoking tobacco might be more yang. And these, if the paranormal or the extra radically misunderstood occurrences might be more yin, you might need to be in more of a yin state to accept and expand, have an expansiveness to your perception, and then hence your considerations. People might be due for changes in their diet or changes in their meditative practices in order to sense and find meaning in a more macro um, fractal of physical existence than is regularly perceived by other individuals, by most individuals. Does that spur anyone on? Still have 7 in here. So, yeah, when you think of consciousness as primacy over physicalism, it's more like you're on the top of a candy cane and you're peering back at the base of the candy cane, the physicalism from which you sprouted. Or you could be starting at the top, the bottom part of the top of the hook, going back down the candy cane to physicalism, but your starting point is in consciousness, how you arose to yourself as a solipsistic understanding and relationship to one's environment. First Sharon, oh, right on the Sharon, okay. I'm about to launch this beast into space. I like the way you paint. Well, I appreciate it. I just kind of laugh because I'm like, wow, I'm still in the drawing mode, not really painting, but I do call it painting. Painting in Philosophy by Mike Phil. Yes, but of course, the painting comes about in such a way, such a manner, as to be liked by others. Alrighty. Yeah, I used to have a hamster, and it had a little plastic wheel to rotate itself on. And it got out of its cage, and it was on the top of a bookshelf, and the bookshelf leaned forward a little bit, so there was about a 4-inch gap at the top, and as it went down to the bottom, down to the floorboards, it pressed against the wall closer and closer, so the base of it was butted against the wall. And the hamster got out of its cage and then fell down the back, and over the next couple of days, it died slowly as it was being squoze into a type of a pancake. And I just remember hearing it squeal like mad, but I couldn't place audibly where this squeal was coming from. I kept looking on the floor, I kept looking in the cage, I kept looking on the top of the shelves. Anytime I looked behind the shelves, I was either looking too far down or too far up, and I didn't just see it there caught in the middle. And a few days later, I kept looking for it and looking for it, and it finally dawned on me that I needed to pull the whole bookshelf out, and there it was, flat as a pancake, dead. And it just upset me to my core. That was just so sad. I was so sad that the animal I was supposed to be taking care of was so, so, I don't know. I don't know. Just that I couldn't save it. Couldn't save the poor thing. Or I didn't try hard enough in my mind to save it. And there it was, just dead. And, I don't know. I guess I've always been a real sensitive child. Ba, 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 But I don't play video games anymore. I haven't played video games, and I mean, I played a few, but I really haven't played video games over the last decade. I don't. I kind of had to make certain my attention was not on such practices, so that I could focus more on primitive forms of art like painting. Where are we time-wise here? We're at an hour and 15 minutes. I guess I'll call this video a wrap, and I appreciate you all appreciating my mohawk, and I'll show you what I've done here. The little chessboard with a little bishop on it, and a little rat in a cage over here. Some things just take forever, you know, like this painting. Of course, I did take a break, but it'd be nice if I drew faster. I've got to work on that. Ciao for now.